Hello my loves, my name is Hannah and welcome to my September wrap up. I read 13 books in September, some of which I really liked. So let's chat about them. Now, the first, how many? Let me consult my notes. The first 6 are all from the Booker Prize long list. In an ideal world, my Booker Prize long list reading vlog would already be up on my channel. However, I'm having some technical issues to do with space and size, and for all sorts of reasons, it ain't up yet. So consider the first part of this wrap up like spoilers for that vlog if it ever ends up on my channel. But at least if it never ends up on my channel, you'll have my quick version of what I think of the books. So I'm not going to go into very much detail on them at all because, fingers crossed, you will be seeing them at some point. So I've kind of roughly grouped these based on how I feel about whether they did or didn't make it onto the shortlist. And I'm going to begin with 2 books that are not on the shortlist, and I think that's wrong. So if you haven't seen my shortlist prediction video, that will be linked down below. But long story short is one of the books that made it onto my personal shortlist is actually on the shortlist. So we can assume that I'm reasonably disappointed all round. The first one I'm going to talk about is The House of Doors by Twan. This is a historical fiction, literary fiction book set in, well, largely set in Malaysia and following a fictionalized version of William Somerset Maugham. It is a book that I thought was really accomplished and well judged and nuanced, and I'm just so surprised that it wasn't on the shortlist. It's sort of a book about, I guess, a book about the secrets we keep and why we keep them and why sometimes we stop keeping them. But I thought it was great and it wasn't on the shortlist, and that was incorrect. Another book that I loved was All the Little Bird Hearts by Viktoria Lloyd-Barlow. This is a sort of quite a quiet book about a neurodivergent mother whose relationship with her teenage daughter is disrupted, let's say, by the arrival of these very glamorous, very interesting, very charismatic new neighbours. And it's a book that sort of is told from the first person. And actually I was watching Mercedes over at Mercy's, oh, what's your handle? Mercy's Bookish Musings or Mercy's Musings? I will link down below. And she said that what she really liked about the book was the way, because it's written from the first person of the mother, Sunday, and she has this thing where she tries to mimic different accents. I listened to the audiobook of this, which was narrated by a person whose name I will put on the screen because I haven't written it down, apologies. And she talks about the accents, like she pronounces this word like this, and she kind of tries to like learn how other accents are, and I just think that was really, yeah, it was really interesting. I really liked it. I thought this is one that I personally would have put on the shortlist. I think it was one of the best, most nuanced portrayals of neurodiversity, and particularly neurodiversity in parenthood or motherhood. I haven't seen explored a lot. Often in books we see the child in the sort of relationship is often the kind of neurodivergent character. That definitely comes up quite a lot in literature. I think it's less common to see it in a kind of parent figure, and I really liked the way Viktoria Lloyd-Barlow did that. She is autistic, the author, and I think therefore it's unsurprising that you had this very sort of authentic, or it felt very authentic portrayal of neurodiversity. And yeah, I really liked it for very personal reasons. I can see why it isn't on the shortlist, but I'm still mad. So there were those two. Then there are two books that I didn't personally put on my shortlist that are on the shortlist, but that I'm not mad about it. I don't mind. So the first was If I Survive You by Jonathan Escoffery. This is sort of a series of interconnected, I don't want to call them short stories because it's not quite right, but sort of slightly disparate views of one person's life, largely one person's life. So they mostly follow the stories. A young man called Trelawney, who is born in Florida to Jamaican parents, and all of the different sort of angles of his life, if you like, that we get are different sort of ways of looking at masculinity and race and class and identity, and I found a lot of it really interesting, and a couple of the sort of sections, the stories, whatever you want to call them, I thought were really, really powerful, but there were a couple that weren't so much for me. But Jonathan Escoffery is definitely a writer that I would look out for again. There were also lots of themes of fatherhood, which I found quite interesting, partly because there's a lot of motherhood on the long list, so it was quite nice to have actually quite an unapologetically more masculine perspective and more of the kind of fatherhood and father figures. I quite liked that. I could see why it's on the shortlist. It just didn't 100% work for me. But like I said, I would read more work by Jonathan Escoffery quite happily in the future. So yay. And the other book that's sort of in this camp is The Bee Sting by Paul Murray, narrated by these people. I listened to the audiobook of this as well. I kind of did a bit of both. I mostly listened to the audiobook, and I had a copy out from the library as well. This is quite a sort of sprawling family drama. Technically, I think the events of the book are quite close together, but you get lots of back history of the family as well, and it's kind of told in these 5 chunks. So there's 4 members of the family. There's the mum and dad, and then a brother and sister. And the dad is working in he runs the family kind of car dealership, and the recession hits and they're having some financial difficulties. They had been quite well off and now they're not. And each of the sections kind of follows one member of the family, but then also, as I said, kind of goes into their pasts a little bit. It's very interesting. All the characters were very well rounded. And then at the end, there's this section where they all kind of blend together, which I thought was really, really well done. And the ending of this book is it is definitely the most mic drop ending of the entire long list. Things that stopped it being on my shortlist, I think maybe largely just because there were other books that I think I preferred, but there were a couple of decisions, like writing decisions, that felt a little bit style over substance. The mums section is all, I didn't realise this because I was listening to the audiobook largely, but the mums section has no punctuation at all, and I couldn't figure out why. It didn't really seem like there was a reason why, at least not one that I could kind of readily look to or understand, and so it felt a little bit like a point of difference for the sake of having a point of difference. And just a couple of things like that, and also a couple of issues with some of the queer characters in the book, like minor issues, nothing terrible, but definitely a couple of raised eyebrows. So, you know, enjoyed it. Again, I would read other things by Paul Murray in the future. I thought it was a little overly long as well. This was like, I think, the chunkiest book on the long list, and yeah, it was a little too long, I thought, in my humble opinion. Then there is a book that is on the shortlist. I DNF'd it. So it's the only book on the long list, spoilers for my vlog, the only book on the long list that I DNF'd. It was A Study for Obedience by Sarah Bernstein. Weirdly, I think I know why it's on the shortlist. It just wasn't for me. It just, I really didn't get on with the writing style of it. But I can absolutely see why it's on the shortlist. It wasn't for me. It wasn't for me. You have to wait for the vlog for more details on why. And then another book that I didn't put on my shortlist, and neither did the judges, so we are in agreement on this, was How to Build a Boat by Elaine Feeney. I didn't DNF this book, but in hindsight, I slightly wish I had. This is a sort of coming of age book about a young boy in Ireland whose mother has died in childbirth, and he is autistic, and he's very kind of scientific, and thinks that if he builds a perpetual motion machine, whatever that is, I still don't know what that is after having read the book, but if he builds that sort of, it will bring his mum back somehow. It will sort of bring her back. But then you're following him, and then you're following the dad, and you're also following his teacher, and it just felt quite muddled and quite messy, and like it wasn't a terrible book, but I don't really know what it was doing on the Booker Prize long list, and I am pleased that it's not on the short list. Sorry. If you loved the book though, please do argue its case in the comments down below, because I think I believe there is magic in there for it to have got onto the long list. I couldn't find it, and compared to the portrayal of autism in All the Little Bird Hearts, compared to How to Build a Boat, I just thought it was like they were poles apart. And then finally, a book that I can actually show you, because it's the only copy, it's the only book on the Booker Prize long list that I actually bought. It's Prophet Song by Paul Lynch, and this is my winner. So I am very pleased that it is on the shortlist. If only one of the books that I wanted on the shortlist was going to be on it, I am glad it's this one. This is a sort of literary dystopian book set in a version of modern Ireland that is very authoritarian, and we're following a mother of four, Eilish, whose husband works for the teaching unions, and very early on in the book disappears. Strong implication being that he has been sort of detained illegally by the government for being disruptive, and the rest of the book is sort of following Eilish in the immediate aftermath of that, and sort of working out what to do, whether she should go, whether she should stay, what she should do with her family. I thought this book was the most perfect marriage of all the books on the long list of, these are the themes that I'm talking about, this is my story, and the writing absolutely and completely being in service of that. So like everything felt completely cohesive, and for me everything worked, and I cried so much, so much. So it's stressful as fuck though, so just like be warned that this book is claustrophobic and horrible, but brilliant. So that is Prophet Song by Paul Lynch. We then have My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. This was the book I read for Women in Translation Month and then didn't finish it in August. But I have a vlog up on my channel, so again, I'm not going to talk in detail about this. This is translated by Anne Goldstein from the Italian. This is the first book in Elena Ferrante's Neapolitan Quartet, so it is set in Napoli. It is following the relationship between two young girls, a relationship that we know at some point sours, because the very start of the book is the main character, protagonist, God. Can you tell it's like 9 o'clock at night? The main character is an old woman at the start, and then she kind of goes back to the beginning of their friendship and starts recounting it. I wasn't sure about this for I think the first 2/3 of the book, but by the end of it, I really liked it. That's all I'm going to say about it. You can watch the vlog if you want to know more, but yeah, I enjoyed it. That was My Brilliant Friend. Another book that I'm not going to talk about in any great detail because you can watch the vlog if you want to. I read the 4th installment of, oh, that's gonna get glary, isn't it? I read the 4th installment of Ali Smith's Seasonal Quartet, Summer. And I mean, if you're not new to my channel, you will know that I adore this woman, and so I loved it. I thought it was great. I did have a slight wobble with it because, as you might expect from like a quartet of books, they were quite separate, although there were some threads that connected the first 3. This one sort of picks up some of the threads from earlier books and winds them back up. But I am Hannah Lost the Plot, and so I didn't always remember who people were or what book they appeared in or what their relationship with each other was. So I think what I would like to do is maybe next year, maybe the year after, I'm going to read them all closer together, and maybe for my own amusement and possibly for yours too, if it's at all interesting to you, do like a little bit of a mapping exercise. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think it is not my favourite yet, but I think I did miss out on a little bit of the cleverness of what she was doing because of not 100% remembering some of the characters. At the moment, as things stand, my favourite of the quartet is still Winter, but I did really like this. Yay for Ali. Then I listened to an audiobook. I listened to Friendaholic by Elizabeth Day. This is a non-fiction book. It's sort of kind of like pop psychology meets memoir, and it's about friendships. Elizabeth was asked once at a dinner party by someone she met what her passions were, like what she was passionate about, and she sort of was like, well, I've never really been like a hobby person, but I think I'm passionate about my friends. I think I'm passionate about friendship. And so she kind of embarked on this sort of journey to understand what friendship is, understand her own relationship with friendship, why she feels sort of compelled sometimes to like gather friends, like why we feel the need to do it, the sort of function that friendships serve in our wider social groups, why friendship is important, why sometimes we struggle to maintain them, what good friendship is, what not. So it was really interesting. Some of it was more memoir-y than not, and I think I preferred the parts that were a little bit more broad than that. But then, you know, like, she's writing from her own perspective, so I'm not going to criticize her for it. But I found some of the bits where she was kind of talking about, you know, some kind of psychological and sociological research into friendship. I think I was a little bit more interested in that with like a couple of illustrations from her life. I think sometimes it just skewed a little bit more, but I enjoyed it. It was good fun. It made me want to like hold all my friends really, really close. So that was nice. Then I read the most beautiful book. This is Alison by Lizzy Stewart. Lizzy Stewart is an illustrator and author, and I've been an admirer of her artwork for a really long time, and I've got one of her like little like comics, and I've coveted this book for ages, and then my partner got it for me for my birthday. And this is the story of a woman called Alison, shock, who gets married quite young and finds herself a little dissatisfied, and is sort of a quest for a more authentic, expressive, emotionally full life. But Alison Stewart, Lizzy Stewart's art style, I mean, you're going to get glare on there. And then we've got, some of them are in full colour, and you also have, it's not all in comic book style, you get some bits in prose, and then bits like this. I just like it, just, I mean, look at that, beautiful, like beautiful, like it's, I will treasure this book just because of how pretty I think it is to look at. I do think at points the story was a little kind of formulaic, or a little kind of like the storytelling sometimes felt a little bit transactional in terms of the words of the story, but I loved it. It was lovely. And yeah, I'm relatively new to graphic novels, but obviously as someone who mostly reads literary fiction, this I think is the sort of graphic novel that I really like. So if you read a lot of books like this and you have recommendations for this sort of thing, I would love to hear those in the comments down below, because yeah, I enjoyed it. I read it in an evening, had a lovely time with it. So that was that. And then another couple of audiobooks. I listened to Tuesday's Gone. I knew it had Tuesday in the title. Tuesday's Gone by Nicci French, which is the second in the Frida Klein series. Again, if you're new here, you won't know this, but if you have been here a while, you will know that I'm a big fan of Jen Campbell's channel, which I will link down below, and she is a big fan of Nicci French. Nicci French are a husband and wife duo who write crime books, and they're just great. They're like these really, well, I've only ever read, this is only the second I've read, and I've only ever read from the Frida Klein series, which is the series that Jen really recommends. But they're very like emotionally complex, psychologically nuanced procedural crime books. So I really like them. They're also narrated by Beth Chalmers. I will correct myself on the screen. And she does a brilliant job with them. And Frida Klein is a psychotherapist who sort of accidentally in the first book ends up involved in a case with the police, and then sort of that unofficial relationship kind of carries on. But Frida is an incredibly interesting character. We get a bit of her personal life, we get some of the case, but it's because she's an outsider to the investigation. It's not like a clear-cut normal procedural where you're kind of following the police as they try and do something. But yeah, big fan. I had a very good time with it. I'm kind of stretching out the series, but definitely as the nights are drawing in, I find myself a little bit more drawn to like a good crimey book. If that is you, if you're looking for some crime and you haven't read Nicci French before, then I thoroughly recommend it. Like I said, it's only the second one I've read. I think there's 7 and it's all the days of the week. So the first one was like Blue Monday, the second was Tuesday's Gone. Third one is like, I don't know, Wednesday's Child is Full of Woe, which is me, by the way. Yeah, Loved it. Thought it was great. Another audiobook here. This is The Rabbit Hutch by Tess Gunty, narrated by, I think it was a full cast, so I'm going to insert narration here. I can't remember. This was a slightly frustrating experience, and it wasn't the book's fault at all. I started listening to this audiobook, I think about 6 months ago, and I listened to it on Scribd, and I got about a third of the way through, I think. And then Scribd do this fun thing where they don't always tell you when titles are going, and it just disappeared from their platform one day, just like disappeared, which was a bit annoying because I was enjoying it, but I wasn't enjoying it like enough to like go out and buy a copy of the book, or like, you know, like get it on a different platform or whatever. And then I noticed that it had reappeared last month, so I thought, oh well, I'll listen to it, and obviously because of who I am as a person, I couldn't just pick up from where I left off because I remembered nothing. But this is an interesting book. So The Rabbit Hutch is a apartment block basically in I'm gonna say like somewhere in Midwest America. And so you're following sort of the lives of the various people that live in the apartment blocks and how they intersect, which I always like as a kind of setup for a book, that sort of slice of life, people living alongside each other but not necessarily seeing or appreciating the fully realised lives that are going on around them. You know how we just sort of think the people around us are like set dressing for our own lives. Maybe I just outed myself there as a terrible person, but you know what I mean. But we are sort of largely following one character, a girl called Blondine, who has had a difficult upbringing and is now living. She was in the social care system and is now kind of living independently for the first time alongside some other sort of people who've previously been in care and are now sort of trying to like strike out on their own, sort of young adults. And we know that something happens to her, and that all of the events that we're hearing about are leading towards something happening to her. We don't know if the thing that happens to her is literal or not, but she's an interesting character. She's very, very clever, quite socially awkward, but she's very like beautiful, and in that sense I found her a little bit tropey. She was like bordering on a sort of like manic pixie dream girl type character. She wasn't 100% that, but there were definitely like vibes. But I did enjoy listening to it. I think I enjoyed it more the second time round than I did the first, partly because you're introduced to like loads of characters really quickly, which always puts me a little bit on edge rather, particularly with audiobooks where it's not very easy to go back and like reference like who is that character again, like who's that guy. But I think the second time around I was a little bit more comfortable with it. Like I said, a little bit tropey. I sort of liked following all the individual characters, and I think some of the ways they were brought together was quite interesting. Some of the ways they were brought together were kind of nutty, and there were a few bit. I didn't like the denouement of the narrative very much at all. I think for a book that is quite long and has lots of kind of moving parts, I think she could have actually done with spending more time on establishing things that needed to be established for the ending to have the payoff that it needed to have. But I liked it. I would be interested to read other things by Tess Gunty, but it didn't blow me away. And then finally ended with a little bit of non-fiction. So this is Blind Spot Exploring and Educating on Blindness by Maud Rowell. This is part of the 404 Inklings series. So 404 Inc are a publisher who have these series of really short little kind of like introductions to different non-fiction topics. So I have like a little set of them. This is only the, I think this is only the second I've read. I think I've read one on transmasculine identity, and I've read this one on blindness, and I've got a few other ones on my shelf. I think it was really interesting. I think any criticism I have of it isn't really fair, because it is designed to be a quick snapshot into a topic that's maybe like an entry point into wider reading, and so I feel like I wanted more, but it isn't the function of this book to give me more. But I did think there were interesting section. There was a really interesting section about actually blindness in culture, not necessarily presentations of blindness in culture, but actually how blind people and people with visual impairments access culture more broadly, but particularly arts and the visual arts. And I had thought the way she spoke about that was really interesting, and definitely made me aware of some sort of ableism that I was carrying around how people with visual impairment can be accommodated for, have a place to play in visual arts, and that was really interesting, and a few other bits and bobs that I enjoyed. But if you've got recommendations for sort of maybe longer form non-fiction, looking at blindness, whether it's from a sort of like a classic non-fiction or more from like memoir, then let me know, because like I said, I enjoyed it as an introduction too. I wanted it to be longer, but that is not fair, because that's not this book's job. So there we go. Quick little rundown. Quick, not that quick. They're never that quick, are they? A rundown of all of the books I read in September. Please let me know what the best books you read were in September. I'm currently enjoying some autumnal reading, but I'm always in the market for more autumnal books, so drop those in the comments down below, anything you're currently reading that's giving you those autumn vibes. And yeah, I will see you soon. Hopefully the next video on my channel will hopefully be that Book of Brides long list vlog. If I can find a way to export it without exploding my laptop. I don't know, it might be something else. If it's not that, you will know that I have not been able to do that. Maybe I'll just put my long list video out, you know, in March of next year, just for funsies. Hey. See you later, France. Bye.